If you are thinking of writing papers out of your PhD thesis, I would say there are two main strategies that you can follow. They have different implications, both of them. The first one, and relating to what Cecilia Loureiro has coined the term, is like producing a Frankenstein type of paper, in which you take out some of the sections of your PhD and put in a kind of coherent narrative, and you print that. This is a kind of Frankenstein, because it's a collection of things. Like Frankenstein, was a being which was a collection of parts of other human beings. The advantage of doing that, perhaps, is that you have a paper in your hands, you feel that you have achieved something, and it more or less is the beginning of your writing process. The disadvantage is that it might take you some time to build this Frankenstein. So if you're going to go for this first strategy, the suggestion is don't spend too much time. Maybe concentrate on producing something maybe of 7,000 to 8,000 words with an introduction, literature review content, section where you find some gaps in the literature, then you talk about your methodology, and then you discuss the findings and some conclusions. The second sort of strategy that you can follow, which is perhaps a bit more complex, is to try to see 3 different areas on your PhD. In my case, for instance, my thesis is on the use of systems thinking to help information technology planning. And just after some years, I realized that there were 3 areas on my thesis. One of them was systems thinking, the other one was information technology planning, and the other one was the information society. In the intersection of those 3 areas, then, this was my PhD. And at the heart of those, there were what my supervisor and my examiners called the key contributions of the thesis. So if you follow this approach, you could trace or dissect your thesis into 3 parts and relate to the contributions, and probably what you are going to have is 3 different types of papers, depending on where you put the emphasis. In my case, I had one paper in which the emphasis was more on systems thinking, so I had a bit of IT planning in it, but not much. There was another paper in which I tackled the issue of IT planning, and systems thinking was not that prominent. And there was another one on the information society and how to explore it. So it gained more prominence. I brought more literature from there, and the other 2 areas were less prominent. This could be a good beginning for you to define what sort of papers you want to take out. But bear in mind that the sort of papers also have to do with what the journals are willing to publish. Okay, let's imagine now that you have defined 3 different papers with an emphasis on different areas. Is that all when it comes to write for publication? I'm afraid not. I'm going to show you 2 piles of things that I believe represent the process that follows. In this pile you have your papers, and in this pile you have your publications. And something that someone told me a while ago, which has been very helpful to me, is you need to keep those piles with something, right? So in here you could have your papers. You could then transform them within the same pile into conference papers, and then you can present your ideas and get some feedback. Then you are going to submit the papers to journals. And 2 things could happen, of course. We know that the paper could be accepted or could be asked for reviews or resubmissions with some changes. So you have to work on that. You may decide that if you are rejected, then you may send the paper to a different journal, but you still keep it in the pile of submissions and publications. It might be that with time you have another idea or you finish another of your writings. So it's a question of submitting it to another journal, and so on. In here, after an acceptance and hopefully your final editions, then this becomes a full paper published and being available to the public. Some papers don't reach that level, probably because you have tried for so many times that maybe your ideas are not quite accepted by a community. You have some options there. You could convert that into a book chapter. So you could have the papers that, okay, you still want to publish, but maybe you don't think that they are good enough, book chapters. The other thing I did, with some of the ideas from those papers, I wrote a single author book, which counts as a publication, but it is a different process as well. It has a bit of educational purpose in it, and it has some exercises and questions. But remember that this is a process of putting things here, and then delivering them, and then putting them more here. If this is empty, it means that perhaps you don't have any ideas that you want to develop. If this is empty, it means that perhaps you need to concentrate on passing some things from here to here. In other words, you need to submit your work for the review of others. And always keep in mind that you need to have something in the pile.